We don't want to punish ourselves when we call the ex or we don't exercise or whatever the changes that we're trying to make. It's what was happening. And it might be, I was really lonely. My best friend just got engaged. And or I was just missing the person. And so what can you do instead when you're lonely? There's lots of things you can do. You can call a friend. There's lots of things you can do when you're lonely that might help you in that moment. It won't take away your overall loneliness, but it will help you feel a little more connected in that moment. Um, and so when we're in maintenance, it's really important to have self-compassion because self-compassion actually holds you more accountable. It's not beating yourself up holds you more accountable. It's the more gentle you can be with the curiosity, with the let's kind of examine what happened, the more accountable you'll be. And then the more you do this new thing, it becomes familiar to you. It becomes the new familiar thing. And now you're not wanting to go back to the old thing because that feels unfamiliar to you now. And that's when you're really making changes, when the new thing starts to feel familiar.
Wow, that's such a lovely description of the waves of changing. And also, like one thing that I think you illuminated for us also is how often we pathologize ourselves. So we pathologize parts of ourselves, and that disconnects us from our process, because that's the way how to push a part of ourselves away. And then we say, oh, why am I stuck with this? And you told us exactly the reverse. Like if I become curious and I ask questions and I look into myself, I actually create intimacy with the parts that I think are dysfunctional. And so I learn about them. And so that's a very beautiful description of self-compassion, but also the changes that it's not a linear line. It's a wave that goes into a direction. That's beautiful. I wanted to ask you, what are helpful practices? Is there anything else that is essential in your work that you would say, well, these are if you were to collect from the whole time that you work with couples, like some of the main principles that you have seen, and you give us maybe 5 principles that you think, listen, these are 5 principles that show up again and again, and I think they're important to consider, to contemplate, to practice.
I think we've talked about some of them, which is, how old am I right now? And what does that younger part of me need from me, not from the other person? What does that younger part need for me as the parent to that 10-year-old, 5-year-old, 12-year-old? Um, I think another one again is learning the operating instructions of your partner and being able to communicate yours. And another thing when around that is just because you tell somebody what your operating instructions are, we have to understand whether they're reasonable, right? Whether that's something very young that you would expect a parent to give you versus what you would expect a partner to give you. And this goes to boundaries as well. So sometimes people will say, well, I set this boundary and the person didn't respect it. And maybe the boundary was so rigid that no human could possibly um, give you that request, right? Like the request is too narrow. It's kind of like I feel like you need to give your partner what I like to call the aquarium. So if you give them a fishbowl, it's too constraining, and nobody can kind of live in the fishbowl. If you give them an ocean, there's no accountability. There's no sense of, what is the structure of us? What happens between us? But if you give each other an aquarium, there's room to swim, but there are also some parameters that you both understand. And so I think when people are setting boundaries, it's really important to say, like, is this an aquarium boundary or is this a fishbowl boundary?